This is my first ever vlog in 2021. You can tell I'm really staying ahead of current trends. And I set up ring lights to try to make my face look good. But, I mean, it's my face, so you get what you get. And I don't really like staring directly at the ring lights because they hurt my eyes, so now I'm wearing sunglasses, which looks stupid, but also sort of hides the fact that I'm reading off of a teleprompter that I set up just on the screen right under the camera, which is slightly below where the camera is looking, so I'm not making great eye contact. So I'm clearly working out the details of actually vlogging as I go. Anyways, the topic. I miss tech conferences. That's a weird thing to miss, but honestly, heading to a distant hotel packed with a wide variety of nerds who've all gathered to talk about a central, overarching topic, it's a lot of fun. I'm not too bullish on the idea of virtual conferences. I mean, I do watch a lot of conference talks because hey, free learnings. But the idea of a virtual conference has never really appealed to me. Now, this might seem hypocritical given as I work in social VR, but that also means that if anybody can solve this problem, it might turn out to be us. VR chat has been used as a platform for like a couple of pretty compelling virtual cons, so it's definitely not out of the question. I actually think that with some really careful organization, someone could put together an enormously successful virtual reality tech conference. The way I do it would just be to structure the content as like a live stream on Twitch, and then just build a series of interlinked watch party rooms in VR for people who are following the stream. And when the speakers are done talking, they could go hang out in the watch party instances. But while that provides a curated stream of content and a space in which to hang out and discuss that content afterwards, like both super important components of a successful con, there are other parts of the experience that we just haven't yet been able to simulate, like the smell or the drinking. This is a digression, but like alcohol is kind of important in the tech industry. It's not necessarily good that that's the case, but it's definitely the case. And it has its upsides and downsides. Alcohol goes about as far back as civilization itself. Despite its potential to be addictive, destructive, or intimately involved in a sexual assault, it's still widely considered to be a pretty primo social lubricant. And as someone who is wildly introverted, I really do appreciate a certain level of intoxication and slash or liquid confidence when I'm interacting with strangers. And that's a lot more likely to be the case like 2 beers in for me. Of course, there are also events where your average person is like 9 beers in, and my puritanical roots cannot abide that kind of behavior. Have some decorum. So, like, I appreciate a context where I can down a responsible amount of alcohol at an event. And, like, side note, if you're throwing tech events and you want to come off like a responsible adult and not Chairman Brewski of Frat House Lambda, uh, just make sure that there are as many non-alcoholic options or even more non-alcoholic options than alcoholic options. Nobody wants to go to an event with 32 craft brews on tap that also just only has Diet Pepsi. If people aren't drinking for any number of valid reasons, treating them like valued guests is as easy as just thinking about them when you're planning the event. Someone's going to drive home, and they probably appreciate a selection of lemonades because everybody appreciates a selection of lemonades, especially people who have access to gin. Okay, I'm getting way off track. I wanted to talk about conferences. First of all, the benefit. Why bother going to a tech conference? Now, the biggest, most obvious benefit is networking. Meeting people who work in your industry of choice is just so powerful for your career. Like, it's a big deal. But I'm relatively convinced that like networking at events like this is actually impossible. Whenever I go to a conference, I'll wear nice clothes, stash some custom printed business cards, coif my hair carefully, shower, put on deodorant, even like give myself a gentle spritz from the expensive citrus and linen scented cologne bottle that I've owned for like the last decade, only to rapidly and crushingly discover that I'm just way too antisocial to sidle up to randos and make friends at a tech conference. I could barely make friends with people who I'm friends with. So, I like to speak at conferences largely because it gives people a reason to come up and talk to me, which breaks down the Fort Knox like social barrier I have around me, preventing all human contact. Unfortunately, the amount of prep required to deliver a confident, charismatic, relevant conference talk is just bonkers. On top of that, it provides good, like, short-term conversation with cool, smart people, but I can't recall ever having turned even a pleasant conference interaction into like a long-term friendship, even a long-term acquaintanceship. So networking, like just to meet people who might be powerful or well-connected, is transparent and gross. I I'm I would prefer to forge genuine connections with interesting people. So my career is doing just fine, and I have never once successfully networked at a conference or an event like a conference. It's just not something that I do. I did do a lot of networking in university, but like literal networking. I was throwing LAN parties for a bunch of people, and many of those people I'm still friends with to this day. But the context of that is just different. I do think, again, that's the more real and valuable kind of networking. It's just genuine connections with interesting people that I made by having fun with them. One thing I do like to do at conferences, though, is just skim social media information from all of the speakers and anybody I meet at all times. Follow them as soon as I get home. Invariably, these people have a lot going on in their socials, so it's like adding a whole new wing to my tech bubble. If someone could really crack the conference networking code, like how to identify and befriend interesting strangers at a big event full of people who you probably would be friends with, this would easily be the most valuable use of conference time. Like, there'd be nothing more important than doing that at a conference, but I haven't cracked that yet. It's at best a theoretical benefit of going to cons. It can be fun to go to a conference with your friends, or if you're friendly with your coworker friends. It's an opportunity to have like a little vacation with people that you like in a remote location with events planned. And sometimes that's on the company dollar, which is extra nice. At this point, if there are talks you're interested in, they hopefully provide a valuable opportunity to learn things as a group together and then talk about them afterwards. This time, right after a talk where you've just learned about the existence of a new technology and you're buzzing with excitement about it, it's a great time to learn how your coworkers would feel about transferring your whole stack to run on RPG Maker MV or something ridiculous like .NET. It's also great for team building. I think it's nice to spend some real time with your coworkers. I know a lot of lifers out there who think that any after work time at all is an infringement on their holy rights to hate their jobs and everybody they work with, but I've almost always worked with people who I'd consider friends and would probably want to hang out with even off hours. Okay, let's talk about conference talks a bit. They're ostensibly the reason you're attending the conference in the first place, and there are lots of different kinds of conference talks, and a lot of them aren't very good. Even every time you sit down at a conference talk, you are facing a 66.28% chance of committing your time to a total snooze ball. I'm not sure if I have enough focus to really enjoy lots of different conference talks. When I watch conference talks on YouTube, I almost always have them running at 1.5x speed. And when I watch conference talks in person, I'm almost always either donking around with my laptop in a super uncomfortable chair or drawing comic book characters in a sketchbook, just something to get my mind off of what's happening around me. Here are some of the types of bad conference talks you might encounter in the conference circuit. There's Mumblecore Jones, the microphone avoider, Davy Shill, and the product that you should definitely, very definitely buy, Ed Vunst and the shit that goes immediately over your head and stays there the entire time, Beginner and the topic that you already know extremely well, Phelan's McFeely and the quest to address some soft topics, Casey Case Study and the extremely specific problem that only their company will ever have, and how they solved it with tools that they aren't sharing, Art Picasso and something that you can do with code that you normally wouldn't do with code. Whoa there. And of course, Snoozy McGee and the topic that you thought you might be interested in, but nope. But great talks do happen, and they're amazing. Sometimes somebody is just delivering on your wavelength, and you put your laptop down and you take furious notes the entire time they're talking. In 30 minutes, you will absorb like a whole new world of information you'd never before even considered. And there's maybe like one or two of these at even the best conferences, but they're so worth it. There was a world building workshop at the Joko Cruise led by N.K. Jemisin, Hugo Award winning author, and I will never ever stop talking about it. There was another one also at Joko Cruise where a professional architect talked about fantasy architecture from the point of view of actual architecture for like an hour, maybe 2 hours. Like, I loved it. I don't know how much time I spent there because it just disappeared. There was a Van.js, a local meetup where the presenter just provided like a simple but incredibly startlingly useful glossary of machine learning terms and basic ML concepts. And it was simple, but it was just the right content for me at the time. The really great talks can be worth hours of less great talks. And when you do get one, you get like excited, like your brain gets infected with the little spark of obsessive madness that you're addicted to. It's great. Okay, I want to say something about Q&A for a second. A tech conference, fan conference, art conference, whatever kind of conference you go to, the rules are always the same. If you get to the front of the line, you get one question. You don't get two questions. You don't get a pitch for your own thing. You probably shouldn't ask, how can I pitch my own thing? You definitely don't get an opportunity to like deliver your own opinion or show off your own knowledge with the barest tiny question mark at the end. This conference is not about you. Your question should be a question, nothing more. A digression, but just a huge pet peeve about Q&As. Now I want to talk about some of the best conferences and some of the worst conferences I've ever been to, just as examples. And I'm going to include both work and fun conferences in this list because ultimately it's all just people meeting up to share stuff they like. And I want to talk about the idea of conferences. So, number one at the top of the heap has been Joko Cruise. It's like musical comedy, Dungeons and Dragons, board games, video games, theater nerds. It's just a big tent of cross cutting middle aged geeks with a lot going on. They booked great talent, ran fun and interesting talks and workshops. They had a local intranet with its discussion software like running on the boat, which hits me right in the weak point for massive damage. It was an end-to-end geek wonderland, only marred by the fact that we couldn't bring any of our friends because it was expensive and on a boat. And it was a cruise, so not only are cruises now synonymous with floating plague disaster, but even before that, they were always terrible for both the environment and everybody working on them. So I don't know. I really hope they move Joko Cruise to like the land eventually. Maybe. I'd still consider going back. It was a lot of fun. And they do buy carbon offsets and run reforestation projects to try to make up for some of the huge karmic balance of running a giant garbage palace on the sea. And I got to meet a Hugo Award winning author, so I consider it. It was pretty fun. Okay, then there was Robots Conf. This was, I think, an offshoot of Jsconf, and I went to this with a friend of mine. It was some of the most fun I'd ever had in an event. I didn't have to talk to anybody, which was pretty sweet. They just taught us the basics of electronics and some Arduino stuff. They juiced us up with some really inspiring talks and set us down in a big auditorium full of spare parts. I got to build a really stupid robot, and I came home imagining that I would turn myself into like an Arduino home project god, a new skill that I promptly forgot entirely and ignored forever. But it was super, super fun. And there's Jsconf USA and the EU, which, to be honest, those JSConfs were like more party than learning experience, but the topics they covered were really interesting and fun and had some of the highest hit rates for me of any tech conference I've ever attended. There were a lot of really great talks at the JSConfs. On top of that, on the way home from speaking at JSConf EU, I found an opportunity to propose to my wife in Amsterdam, a city that I will argue is significantly more romantic than Paris. But I don't want to talk about how Amsterdam is better than Paris. We're talking about other stuff. But Paris is a garbage city. Anyways, PyCon, an excellent, well thought out, informative con with good talks. It skews a little starchy. Most people in Python are professionals and it really shows, but it's still totally worth attending if you've got time. And on the total opposite end of it, PAX. PAX is a lot of fun every year, although the PAX talks are super consumer focused. I'd be really interested to attend the PAX for people who make games rather than for people who consume games at some point, because I like to play video games, but I'm much more interested in building them, which is also the thing that I do for a living. But I haven't attended it. I also haven't attended GDC, and that's definitely on my list. There's but with the lack of learning opportunities aside, the show floor at PAX is just like a gigantic mall carnival of really neat stuff, and they throw cool video game themed concerts, and it's fun. PAX is great. Then there's the Seattle Comic Con and Van Expo, which, despite Tiffany and I both being artists who are like really hungry to learn interesting techniques in art, the content at Comic Cons is almost always consumer focused rather than creator focused. It's the PAX problem all over again. They're a venue for fans to geek out over things that they love, not a venue for people to learn how to create things. So the show floor is always overflowing with cool things to buy, but we have like a 900 square foot apartment and it's overloaded with geeky stuff already. So when we're at these, we mostly spend our time. I spend a lot of time trying to convince my wife that as adults, it might be irresponsible for us to seriously consider purchasing a floor-to-ceiling art installation devoted entirely to a peripheral character from A Song of Ice and Fire. That's what our fan expo time is usually like. But still, it's fun. Okay, so those were some of my favorite conferences. Now I want to talk about my least favorite conferences. And all of my least favorite conferences have mostly been really just aggressively sales focused. There's a whole subgenre of conference that is just straight up one company talking directly with its customers. Mongo World, Redisconf, Dreamforce, AWS reInvent, the Oculus OC conventions, and they're generally like pretty posh. If you're looking to scam free drinks and snacks, these are the cons to be at. But their talks are almost always just thinly veiled feature rollouts. Then there's O'Reilly conferences, which are just part of their product line. You pay a lot of money to go to them and learn from people who haven't been paid a lot of money. I spoke at a O'Reilly conference, so I got most of their expensive packaged in conference stuff. I walked away from the whole thing thinking, what a scam. I think O'Reilly still has a video of me that they're selling as part of their hyper expensive Safari offering. So great. I've become part of their product line. Anyways, the bottom of the barrel is E3. It's like PAX, but just worse in every conceivable way. It's like living inside a disappointing video game trailer for 3 entire days. There was one shining light at E3, though. Devolver Digital was running a tent where people with insider badges could drink and eat for free, and I basically just made that my new home. I now am obligated to buy every Devolver game that ever gets made, just out of gratitude for that tent. Okay, thanks. Thanks for listening to me go on about conferences for who knows how long and while covering any number of weird side tangents. That's it. Log 1. Boom.